Hi, we will now explore some very personal and emotional themes. What inspired you to tell this particular story?
Wow, that's a good question.
Thank you.
I had moved back to Chicago as an adult after my father had passed away, and I was interested in exploring the relationship that I have to home now that my father is no longer there. The place has changed. But I wanted to do it through the perspective of a community. And to take on a very different process than I had with my previous film. You know, the previous film was very autobiographical. In this movie, I wanted to explore something new through this community that I had been connected to by two friends who are also from Chicago.
Okay.
These journalists that had spent a lot of time documenting the lives of people who live in the projects. And I just started interviewing people, and that process took several years. And over the course of several years, I realized there was so much in their stories that felt like it needed to be in a movie. And what was exciting about their stories too was that I was really surprised by what they focused on. They focused on the domestic life every day, not just the sensationalized parts, not just the tragedy and the difficulties of living there, but the joys and the beauty, the friendship, the families, everything that I feel like I just hadn't seen before in a movie.
Can you talk about the casting process? How did you find the right actors to bring these characters to life?
So the casting process took a very long time. It took a year and a half. We had seen hundreds of children.
Yeah.
All of it was done over Zoom, and you know, the hard part was casting two kids at the same time. We really needed to feel that they both have chemistry. So we found Malik's, the actor who played Malik first. So we found Blake, and he was so charismatic and extroverted. We felt like he's absolutely Malik. And then we found Gian, who plays Eric, later than him, and you know, he really needed to embody like a kid who has an old soul, and he's quieter and he's more introverted, and Gian is actually from Chicago, so we had two kids come together and we started to do rehearsals, and we realized they have chemistry. These are definitely the kids that are going to be in the movie.
It is on the screen we saw that.
Oh, thank you.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced while making this movie?
Oh, every part of this movie. This is a good question for us.
Thank you.
Everything from the creative, you know, it's a challenging movie because it's a period film from the perspective of these kids.
Yes.
It explores a heavier subject matter. You know, we're touching on the themes of systemic racism, the challenges of living in public housing, and we're doing it in a very, you know, through a very particular lens. There was that part, the creative, and then there was the financial part was hard because we needed to have enough money to really be able to recreate this place, because the place that you see in the movie, that we did that in stages. We built the apartments that they are in. And then the rest, you know, the last part that's really hard about this movie is getting it out there and to have the audience to see it, because it is a smaller film, and it is becoming harder and harder for small films to receive theatrical releases. We were lucky we had Sony Classics come on board and and release the movie. But every part of this movie was challenging, but we had the support of Sony and participants that really believed in the movie and what we were trying to do.
What message or feeling do you hope audience take away from watching this movie?
Oh, this is an easy one. What I really hope that audience come away from this movie understanding that a home is a place, and a place is the people. It is the people that make it significant and meaningful. It's why it's home. And I think that is something that anyone can relate to.
How did you balance the personal and cultural aspect of the story while keeping it relatable to a broad audience?
You know, I think that the more specific the story was, that I really felt like people were able to relate to it, even if they hadn't grown up in public housing. You know, the smallest memories, the details, experiences, I was very surprised to learn that a larger audience can relate to it. Like even the small things, like the Danish tin cookies with the sewing supplies. I grew up with that.
Nice.
You know, and I didn't grow up in the high rise. So, or you know, going to the art institute. Like those are experiences that I think people understand the feeling of, even if it's not the specific. I think that's what we hope to achieve in the movie, was that everyday people lived in the high rises. Everyday people like myself, like other people. It's, you know, they have dreams and families, and friends, and that's what I hoped to convey in the film.
Were there any specific films or filmmakers that influenced your approach to this movie?
Crooklyn by Spike Lee is a big reference for us. Killer of Sheep by Charles Burnett. And we are also inspired by the child acting in the Florida Project, Sean Baker, who also has another film here.
Yeah, he will be for the festival.
So we, those are some of the movies that had inspired and influenced us. But we were also inspired a lot by photography of the time, of street photography of Cabrini-Green in the late 80s and early 90s.
How has your personal experience shaped the narrative of this movie?
I mean, I believe that with every movie that I do, that I'm trying to approach it with the goal of telling an emotional truth. Like, I'm trying to share an experience. Like, most of all of anything, that a movie is more of an experience than anything else. And I'm hoping to take the audience on a journey. And this particular movie was, I'm going to take you to this place that you've never been, you can't have possibly gone to, and make you feel like you wanted to be there, and that you understand what it's like to be there, and that you feel sadness when Malik leaves, because you come to understand this place as home too. And I think that the way that I approach storytelling is that it really needs to make you feel something. Like if you don't feel something, then maybe you're doing something wrong. And that's really what my sensibility is when it comes to filmmaking. It
was perfectly on screen for the audience.
Oh, thank you.
The film has a very intimate visual style. Can you talk about the collaboration with your cinematographer and your vision for the film's look?
So Pat Scola is the cinematographer, and he and I worked very closely to recreate a place that doesn't exist anymore, but also do it through a perspective. So we really focused on what things would look and feel like from a child's perspective, even like the details, the angle and the level at which eye level with the children. He brought a lot of that to the movie, and I also pushed and brought him, we should really try to push this movie formally, because I think there's some expectations of what a film set in the project will be like, and we need to really destroy those expectations and try to do something new. And so we did that in every aspect when it came to the composition, the movement of it, and the color too. There's a lot of warmth in this place that, again, you wouldn't normally expect. And Pat has experience working with children before, which is a huge reason why. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to work with him was because he understands that what is centered to this movie is these kids.
Yes. Can you share a bit about the writing process? Did the story evolve significantly from script to screen?
So the script evolved and came together out of these conversations, these interviews I had with former residents. So that took place over several years. But then when it came to filming, there were still things that I was changing up until the day of. For the most part, though, what I did was I listened to the children when they were talking and speaking the lines, and really listening for moments that didn't feel honest. And when it didn't feel honest, I changed it. And sometimes they would say something differently than I had written it, just by mistake. And I kept it in the movie because I liked it. I really liked that they were saying it as a child would say it.
In what ways do you think the film speaks to the current moment, socially or culturally?
I mean, I think when we made this film, we shot it in 2022, and it's been 30 years since Santrell was shot and killed. And what is happening now is that we have a greater awareness of violence. We have a deeper understanding of systemic inequity and systemic racism. But what I think is harder, it's harder to accept right now, is that we are still witnessing a lot of that to this day. And the challenges is the gap between what we know and what is being done about it. But I think the film, unfortunately, and very unfortunately, is only becoming more relevant in our culture, because these are ongoing issues we're dealing with when it comes to public housing, systemic racism, and police brutality. These are all things we're still dealing with today.
The title, We Grown Know, feels very evocative. How did you decide on that title, and what does it significant for you?
So it was very important that the title of the movie be something that the kids could actually say, and it felt like We Grown Now is something like they would say in their words. And then other reason why this title is very meaningful is that one of the people I interviewed, MC Tree, he made an album of his music and it was titled We Grow Now. And when I met with him and I interviewed with him, I asked him, I love the title of your album, I would really love to make the title of the movie this. And he gave us his blessing. He was like, I would love for that. And so it really feels like it held a special place in my heart because it pays tribute to him and his lived experiences, and also it's very clearly feels like it's from the perspective of these kids in the movie.
How did you handle the responsibility of presenting diverse voice and stories in your work?
With this movie, it was something that I really took very seriously. I think, this is a place that I'm not from. I'm not from Cabrini-Green, so it's very important for me to approach with curiosity and not assume anything.
Yes.
So every conversation I entered, I was always trying to understand, their life and their lived experiences, and not going with any assumptions or expectations. I think at the end of those conversations, I was constantly surprised.
Yes.
Because I remained open to what they were saying and sharing with me, and I was really there to listen. And I think I didn't experience hostility when I was interviewing people because they were just very curious why anyone was interested. And the reality is that I'm a filmmaker, I'm not a journalist, and so what I'm trying to present is a story.
Yes.
It's only one particular slice of life. I'm not trying to tell the whole story. I couldn't possibly in one movie. And I think they really respected that I was coming from a place of wanting to learn more. It's a challenge for sure. It's the thing that made it hard to make this movie. For me personally, was the thing that kept me up at night was that all these people have shared their stories with me. They've shared their time and their resources. They're so generous, and the movie really has to honor them, and I think that was hard for me, a challenge for me as a filmmaker.
What advice would you give to young filmmakers who want to tell deeply personal stories like you have with this film?
I have one piece of advice that I've shared with my students in the past. Is to make a film, write a story, make a film that changes your life. Do it because you feel passionate, because you go to it every day. You feel called to do it. It should mean something to you, because if it doesn't mean something to you, it won't mean something to other people. So choose the stories that transform you.
Yes. And my last question, what's next to you after We Grow Now? Are the other projects in development that you are excited about?
I've written the script for my next movie already, and I'm hoping to cast it soon, so my fingers are crossed. But as these things take time, I don't divulge too many details because all of it is subject to change. But I'm really excited for the next film because I'm exploring an adult's perspective. The past two films have been from the perspective of a teenager, and this one is from these kids.
Nice.
So I'm excited to tell a story from the lens of two 30-somethings. I want to explore what life is like through people like my age.
Perfect. Can I take a picture?
Yes.
Thank you.